Have you ever watched someone struggle with a problem that seemed impossible, only to discover the solution was simpler than anyone imagined? Sometimes the answer we're desperately seeking is sitting right in front of us, if only we're humble enough to listen. This is the story of a millionaire family, a dying baby, and the nanny who understood every secret they thought was hidden. Sarah Chen walked through the iron gates of the Goldberg estate in Scarsdale, New York, her heart heavy with what the agency had told her. The baby is failing to thrive. 3 nannies have quit. Mrs. Goldberg is on the edge of a breakdown. The family is desperate. At 33, Sarah had worked as a pediatric nanny for over a decade, specializing in difficult cases. But when Rebecca Goldberg opened the door, Sarah understood this was different. Rebecca looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Designer clothes hanging loose on her frame, dark circles under her red-rimmed eyes, hands trembling as she gestured Sarah inside. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Rebecca said, her voice cracking. "The agency said you have experience with feeding issues." "Yes, ma'am. I've worked with many challenging situations." Rebecca led her upstairs to the nursery, an immaculate room filled with expensive equipment, organic everything, and the sterile perfection of people with unlimited resources and mounting panic. In the crib lay a 9-month-old baby boy who looked more like 6 months. Jacob was pale, listless, with the hollow eyes of a child slowly starving. Sarah's professional mask slipped for a moment. "This was serious. He won't eat anything," Rebecca whispered. "We've seen 6 pediatricians, 2 feeding specialists, a gastroenterologist. No allergies, no medical issues. He's healthy, except he's dying because he refuses to eat. I've tried everything, special formulas, organic purees, different bottles, different temperatures. Nothing works." Sarah picked up Jacob gently. He was alarmingly light, barely responsive. "How long has this been going on?" 3 months. He was fine, then suddenly stopped eating. "We've had him hospitalized twice. They feed him through an IV. He stabilizes. We bring him home, and he stops eating again." Rebecca's voice broke completely. "They're talking about a permanent feeding tube." At 9 months old, from downstairs, Sarah heard a man's voice speaking rapidly on the phone, in Hebrew. She stiffened slightly, but kept her expression neutral. "That's my husband, David," Rebecca explained. "He's on a business call. That's been very hard on our marriage." Sarah understood more than Rebecca knew. Those 6 years she'd spent in Israel, working on a kibbutz, learning the language, immersing herself in the culture, had given her skills that didn't appear on her resume, including the ability to understand every word David Goldberg was saying on that phone call. And what he was saying made her blood boil. Sarah settled into the Goldberg household, focusing on Jacob while observing everything. The baby was indeed refusing food, but Sarah noticed something the specialists had missed. It wasn't the food he was rejecting, it was the environment. Every feeding was a battlefield. Rebecca approached with visible anxiety, practically vibrating with stress. The more anxious she became, the more Jacob tensed. The more he tensed, the more Rebecca panicked. It was a vicious cycle that no amount of expensive specialists could break, because they were treating symptoms, not causes. And then there was David. Sarah heard his phone conversations, all in Hebrew, all assuming privacy. The first one came on her second day, while she was in the hallway outside his study. Into the phone. Hall. Into the phone. "No, I can't deal with this anymore. Rebecca is falling apart. The baby is dying, and I'm trapped in this nightmare." Sarah continued organizing the linen closet, her hands steady despite her racing heart. She blames herself, says she's a terrible mother. I don't know what to tell her. There was a pause, then David's voice dropped lower, more bitter. Maybe if she was less stressed, the baby would eat. Sarah felt fury rise in her chest. This man was blaming his wife for their son's condition, blaming her stress while his judgment was making her more stressed. Classic toxic cycle. Over the next few days Sarah heard more. David complaining to his brother about Rebecca's hysteria. David telling his mother that Rebecca was too emotional to handle the situation. David explaining to a business partner that he was considering separating because he couldn't live like this. All in Hebrew, all assuming no one understood. Meanwhile, Sarah watched Rebecca torture herself, trying feeding technique after feeding technique, reading every book, following every specialist's advice, falling apart more with each failure. On the fourth day, Sarah made a decision. Sarah found Rebecca in the kitchen, staring blankly at an array of expensive organic baby food jars. "Mrs. Goldberg, can I ask you something personal?" Rebecca looked up, exhausted. "Of course. What did your mother feed you when you were a baby?" Rebecca blinked, confused by the question. "I don't know. Normal baby food, I guess." "Why? And when you were sick as a child, what made you feel better?" "My grandmother's chicken soup. She'd make it from scratch, and somehow it always worked." A sad smile crossed Rebecca's face. "I haven't thought about that in years. When's the last time you ate something that made you feel loved and cared for? Not expensive or organic or specialist recommended, just comforting." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "I don't remember. Everything is so clinical now. Measured, calculated. Every meal with Jacob is a medical procedure." "And how does that make you feel?" "Terrified. Like if I do one thing wrong, he'll die. Like I'm failing at the most basic thing a mother should be able to do, feed her child." Sarah took a breath. "Mrs. Goldberg, Rebecca, can I try something? Something unconventional. The doctors have tried everything. I know, but I'm not a doctor. I'm a nanny who learned some things from my time living in Israel. Things about babies and food and love that aren't in medical textbooks." Rebecca looked at her with desperate hope. "What things?" "Let me cook for Jacob. Not from jars or formulas. Real food, made with intention and calm. And let me change how we approach feeding. No stress, no pressure, just gentleness." The specialist said he needs specific nutrients, exact calories. He needs to eat first. Sarah interrupted gently. "Right now he's not getting any nutrients because he won't eat anything. Let me try this for 3 days. If it doesn't work, you can fire me and go back to the specialists." Rebecca studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, 3 days." Sarah went to a local market and bought simple ingredients: sweet potatoes, carrots, apples, chicken, rice. In the Goldberg state-of-the-art kitchen, she prepared food the way her grandmother had taught her during those years in Israel. Slow-cooked, aromatic, made with patience instead of panic. She made a simple broth, fragrant with vegetables and gentle spices. As it simmered, she hummed old lullabies she'd learned in Hebrew, songs that transcended language and spoke directly to something primal in children. When it was ready, Sarah didn't take Jacob to his high chair in the sterile nursery. Instead, she took him to the garden, sat on a blanket under a tree, and held him close. No bibs, no special equipment, no anxiety, just her, Jacob, and a bowl of warm, simple food. "Okay, little one," she murmured. "Let's try something different." She dipped her pinky finger in the broth, just a tiny amount, and touched it to Jacob's lips. He flinched. She didn't push, she just held him, humming, letting the aroma surround them. 5 minutes passed, 10, 15. Then Jacob turned his head slightly toward the bowl. Sarah dipped her finger again, offered it gently. This time, Jacob's tongue darted out, tasting. His eyes widened slightly. Sarah kept her reaction minimal. No excitement, no pressure, just calm acceptance. She offered another tiny taste. Jacob took it. Over the next hour, Jacob consumed perhaps a tablespoon of broth. To anyone else, it would seem like nothing. To Sarah, it was everything. Rebecca, watching from the window, was crying. The breakthrough came on the 3rd day. Jacob had been eating small amounts, still not enough to satisfy doctors, but enough to show progress. He was more alert, had more color in his cheeks, was actually smiling. Sarah was feeding him on the patio when David came home early from work, still on a phone call, speaking Hebrew, of course. Ye, 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 was Helbis, ye, 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 and then umze, ye, c, ye,
Yee.
But Rebecca is still crazy. She cries all the time. I don't know how much longer I can, Mr. Goldberg, Sarah said, clearly, looking up at him. Your son can hear you, and while he might not understand the words yet, he understands the tone. Children feel everything. David stared at her, the phone still pressed to his ear. I'm sorry, what? I said your son can hear you. He's very sensitive to emotion and tension. It affects his ability to eat. David's face flushed. I was on a private call. In Hebrew, yes.
Yee. 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 Yee.
I understand Hebrew. The color drained from David's face.
Yee. What?
I lived in Israel for 6 years. I'm fluent. I've understood every phone conversation you've had since I started working here. Sarah kept her voice calm but firm, including the ones where you blamed your wife for your son's condition. David ended his phone call, looking like he might be sick. How much did you hear? Enough to know that you're making everything worse. Your wife is destroying herself trying to save your child, and you're telling people she's the problem. That kind of energy, that blame, that resentment, it fills this house, and Jacob feels it. I didn't mean I was just venting. You were being cruel, Sarah corrected, and you were doing it in a language you thought gave you privacy. But Mr. Goldberg, there is no privacy from the emotional environment you create. Jacob doesn't understand Hebrew, but he understands that his father is checked out, and his mother is drowning in anxiety. David sat down heavily on a patio chair. What am I supposed to do? Start by supporting your wife instead of judging her. Stop having conversations about how she's failing. Start being present, and maybe, just maybe, thank her for keeping your son alive while you've been busy having business calls in Hebrew. That night, something shifted in the Goldberg household. David, humbled and ashamed, apologized to Rebecca, not just a casual sorry, but a real tearful acknowledgement of how he'd failed her. He admitted to the blame, the judgment, the emotional absence. Rebecca, exhausted but relieved, finally broke down completely, the kind of cathartic breakdown she'd been holding in for months. And David, for the first time since Jacob's feeding problem started, held her and let her cry. Sarah continued her work with Jacob. Slowly, patiently, she increased his food intake. Small meals, prepared with care, offered with calm. No pressure, no anxiety, just nourishment and love. 2 weeks later, Jacob was eating normally. He'd gained weight, his color was healthy, and he was developing like any typical baby his age should. The specialists were baffled but pleased. The feeding tube was permanently shelved. One evening, as Sarah was preparing to leave for the day, Rebecca stopped her. Sarah, I need to thank you. You saved my son's life. You saved his life, Sarah corrected. You never gave up on him, but you knew what he needed. How did you figure it out? I learned it in Israel, actually. There was a grandmother on the kibbutz where I worked, Savta Ruth. She taught me that babies need more than nutrients. They need to feel safe. They need calm. They need to know that eating is about love, not anxiety. Rebecca smiled through tears. That's beautiful. It's also why I understood what was happening in your house. The stress wasn't coming from your mothering. It was coming from the environment, the judgment, the blame, the fear. Jacob was responding to all of it. David feels terrible about the things he said. He should, but what matters is what he does now. Sarah paused. Rebecca, you're an incredible mother. You fought for your child when everyone, including your husband, doubted you. Don't ever forget that. 6 months later, Jacob was thriving. The Goldbergs had transformed. David was present and supportive. Rebecca had found her confidence, and their home felt warm instead of sterile. Sarah had moved on to another family in need, but Rebecca still texted her regularly with updates and photos, and occasionally, she'd include a message in Hebrew, phrases she was learning so that she too could understand everything said in her home. The last photo Sarah received showed Jacob on his first birthday, face covered in cake, laughing joyfully. The message read, "Thank you for teaching us that the best medicine is love, patience, and homemade food, and for reminding us that secrets in Hebrew aren't secret if the right person is listening. Hevus, 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 Theus, Theus, thank you for everything." Have you ever discovered that the solution to a complex problem was surprisingly simple? Have you watched someone struggle because they were addressing symptoms instead of causes? Sometimes we get so caught up in expensive specialists and complicated interventions that we forget the basics: love, patience, calm, connection. Sarah's story reminds us that healing often comes from the heart, not the textbook, and that secrets spoken in other languages aren't really secret. Truth has a way of being heard, whether through words we understand or energy we feel. What's a time when a simple solution changed everything for you? Share your story below.